Welcome back, seedlings. We made it one verse into Jeremiah 6.
True, though, but we did go back to Jeremiah 5. So we got a couple verses or a
So
verse.
we got
or
two
something.
verses
Yeah, it
in
counts.
Jeremiah.
Actually, I think we get credit for the whole Jeremiah chapter 5.
No
we went
way!
backwards,
Oh,
yeah.
why? I could talk about Jeremiah 5 for days.
31 verses. So
Days and days and days.
Oh,
And it would scare everybody, and they would all run away calling us fearmongers.
because impending disaster to Jerusalem doesn't scare people. Wow.
Well, I don't know. Like, whatever. This is what it is. It's not my word, it's God's.
That's right.
It's underlined. That in my Bible, that means it's God speaking.
So
Can't yell at me for that.
yeah. So God said, "Get out of Jerusalem."
Yeah.
All right.
Verse 2.
Yeah. Ready.
I've likened the daughter of Zion to a comely and delicate woman. The shepherds with their flocks shall come unto her. They shall pitch their tents against her round about. They shall feed every one in his place. Prepare ye war against her. Arise and let us go up at noon. Woe unto us! For the day goeth away, for the shadows of the evening are stretched out. Arise and let us go by night, and let us destroy her palaces.
I love the imagery in this section. Like, so lost, so stuck here, right? Because Jerusalem is likened to the nobles, to the rich people, to the wealthy. Mm-hmm. And who is God bringing against them? And the lowly shepherds, right? Mm. We were sitting talking with our friend Ned this morning, and you brought up God uses the unworthy people, right? Only is what you said.
Messed
right?
up people.
Yes. I was trying to make it King James-ish, right? So
only the defiled, unclean.
Unworthy people. God uses, in the Israel world, the shepherds would have been unclean. Mm-hmm. Unclean people, right? And that's the imagery here, right? Is that God's going to bring a group of people against the noble, against the rich. He's going to bring up people to show the nobles and the rich, you're off, right? Mm-hmm. What imagery for the United States? What imagery for us as Christians here, living here, right? We are the nobles of the whole world. We have been so blessed. We have been so kept. We have been so all these things, right? Mm-hmm. Our battles have been so marginal, mm-hmm. right?
And they certainly aren't here.
Right. And yet God is basically saying to, listen, I'm going to bring up those that you have decided are unworthy. I'm going to lift up those that you have decided, that aren't worth me, and to bring you down. That's the whole point, right? Mm-hmm. Again, is this disastrous in nature? It's gonna be, mm-hmm. right? But the whole point is to get their attention, right? So God uses the unworthy, not because He doesn't want to use, the rich and the people who have stuff, but because we won't listen.
Can I go back to 5 again?
You're going to. So it's just going to give me more verses.
He said, I don't remember where it is, but there's not that many to look through. But it's the exact same thing in 5 where he says that you thought you were, exempt from famine and from the sword. Yeah. And that he's going to bring a foreign nation. Mm-hmm. And okay, fine. 17. The foreign nation shall eat up your harvest, your bread. Mm-hmm. The sons and the daughters should eat. They shall eat the flocks, the herds, the vines, the fig trees, and they will impoverish thy fenced cities, mm-hmm. wherein you trusted with the sword. So it's like, he's like, oh yeah, you thought you were special, you thought you were better, you thought you were exempt, you thought this could never happen here, you thought you couldn't have famine, you thought you couldn't have war. Well, I'm going to bring exactly that to you because you've said that you're above all of that stuff.
Yeah, you were relying on
it's
your
exactly
strength.
How God does it.
Yep.
That's why you got to be careful with this will never, God will never, I'm never going to whatever, because then God's going to do that.
Well, and again, isn't it amazing?
Because he wants you to know he's God.
Right. He's going to bring an army with their sheep, with shepherds, and he's going to put it on the outside of the city, but you're going to stay on the inside. Right? Again, that's also a reminder of look at the provision that's out here, but you aren't able to get out to it. Right? Because when God walls us up, we're not able to get to his provision. right? When God says, listen, you've crossed lines, one of the things that you and I talk about frequently, but we talk about with lots of people frequently is, man, where are we in that line that God has? We don't want to be anywhere near it, right? I don't want to be on a line where we've crossed it one too many times or one time. And all of a sudden, God's provision,
The Moses line,
and protection is removed from us. And yeah,
terrifying.
I surely hope that you're going to do a reflection on that, because every time I think about that, I reflect, right, on what you've said. And like you asked it to me, like in a way of like, hey, have we crossed the line? Have we done this? And like, are we, am I by a Moses thing? Like, are people by like whatever? And your initial reaction is like, no, we live in the New Testament. No, it's 70 times 7 and all these things. But at other moments where God says, enough, like, flee the city, because now it's not about you can repent enough. Now it's not about you can change your mind. Flee this area. Like, you're no longer going to be here, right? When we talk about seeds, we talk about things like, is that happening at your workplace where God has asked you to step up and stand out and you haven't and you haven't. And now God's saying, yeah, I don't have work for you here anymore.
Right.
Step out, get away, because I sent you here to bring about warning. I sent you here to bring about protection. Right? And sometimes people, now I'm really going to get stuck, right? Sometimes we're sent for people like that. Sometimes we're sent to people to protect them, and our provision becomes their provision, but they just don't get it. They don't want to get it. And when they're given an opportunity, they even shake their fist at God and say,
yeah,
even if this was a God thing, I don't want it. Right? I don't want this. When you utter words like that, sometimes God says to us, okay, you need to flee Jerusalem.
Leave them.
Right? When you think of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and you think of Lot, if the angels had gotten down there, been able to just get Lot and 5 other people out, whatever it was, 10 people out, what a great thing. But they got there and the people of the city crossed the line, right? They crossed the line and wanted ungodly things. And I thought, like, we don't care who you are, right? We don't care what you're here for. They were this close to being basically saved from an impending disaster. If any of those people had changed their heart, had gotten it, had heeded Lot, had not done what God would God have relented? And he did. He told Abraham that he would have.
We talked about that last night too, about Abraham going through the numbers. I don't remember what he started, 30 or something, or 40, 50 or whatever. Yeah. And he was like, if there's this many. And God's like, yeah. And he's like, well, if there's this many. God's like, yeah, find them. Because, again, it starts in chapter 5. Run to and fro through the streets. See now, seek in the broad places, if you can find a man, if there be any that can execute judgment that seeks the truth, and I will pardon it. Yeah. So God doesn't just do that once with Sodom and Gomorrah. He's saying, find me someone. But I'll pardon it.
Isn't it amazing that
he doesn't want to do this?
When it comes down to it, it's still about the individual.
Yeah.
I don't get to look at people and say, your sin made me a worse person, and you're my excuse. Right? No. So everybody in Jerusalem, God's writing this and talking to individuals. You have to figure this out. You have to think this through. You have to respond to this. You have to answer as an individual. And we don't, right? So we just keep, it's funny, the things we want corporate. Sin is always corporate. Sin is always like, oh, I'd be better if everybody else was better, and everybody else is doing it, so I'm doing it, and all this stuff. Blessing is way more individual in nature. We want it for ourselves, right? Right. It's not for everybody. So when I win the lottery and get my $1 million, it's not for everybody.
Just me.
Right? It's just for me, actually. You were right. Yeah, just me. But when we look at sin, it's everybody did. Everybody's doing it. Everybody, and more everybody. Right? And again, that's problematic in nature. So I think,
Willful ignorance.
yeah, I think there's some great truth for seeds, people, right? For our little seedlings in this whole thing about, listen, find yourself in these stories. Is God using you as a shepherd?
Hopefully.
Bringing you, to the people who need it? Or is God looking at you and going, I set you up to be a noble and you're not leading very well, right? You're not making a very spectacular king, is from the Lord of the Rings, right? You're not making a very fine example, right? So when Gandalf the wizard looks at Thorin and says, yeah, you're not doing a really good job at this leadership thing.
Right.
Man, we do not want God to say that to us. And I said, you and I were talking about earlier this morning when we were doing some praying. People start thinking all we do is talk and pray, and they're like, I want to go live with those guys, right?
Yeah.
But we were talking about that, and I was just sharing with you, like, you just get so caught up wanting to do things wrong, right? Like there's this where it can paralyze you, right? Where you're just so afraid of goofing everything up. But there's a flip side of that where you're not afraid, right? Where you're not afraid of goofing things up. You actually stand on things and think you're doing things right.
We just talked about that too, like a week ago, about not focusing on avoiding sin, just focusing on pursuing Jesus.
Yep.
Because if you're pursuing Jesus, you're less likely to sin. But if you're just focused on the sin you're trying to avoid or your thing you're trying not to do, you're not paying attention to anything else.
Yeah.
And then you would even say you're idolizing avoiding sin.
Yes.
Jesus is like, well, if you just look at me, you won't.
Well, I think, again, I think it's important. Last week we talked about fleeing Jerusalem. This week, really, it's about, are you a nobleman or a shepherd in God's economy?
Yeah.
Where are you, and what are you doing with what God has given you, right?
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Good wrap up. Are you a nobleman or a shepherd?
Oh, look at that. Look at how you just did that. Fantastic.
You did it for me.
Hey, we got through 4 more verses, though, so I was very excited.
Holy cannoli.
Fantastic.
Only 20 more videos.
Ooh.
Are you excited, guys?
Yeah, we might not make it to Christmas. We better slow down.
I've put snow falling in the background.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. So, yeah, Jeremiah 6. Are you a nobleman or a shepherd? Figure it out. Pray about it. See you next week.